The fluorescent lights of Veterans Memorial Hospital hummed their familiar tune as Sarah Reid scrubbed her hands for what felt like the 1,000th time that week. It was 2:47 a.m. on a Tuesday, and the emergency room buzzed with the controlled chaos she'd learned to navigate like a seasoned captain steering through a storm. "Nurse Reid, incoming." The young resident's voice cracked with urgency. "Marine, 22, shrapnel wounds from training accident at Pendleton." Sarah's hands moved with practiced precision, pulling on fresh gloves as she walked briskly toward Bay 3. At 52, her blonde hair had begun showing streaks of distinguished silver, pulled back in the same no-nonsense bun she'd worn for 30 years. Her scrubs were standard navy blue, but the small gold anchor pin over her heart told a story most people never thought to ask about. The young Marine on the gurney couldn't have been more than 23, his face pale against the white sheets, fresh blood seeping through the temporary bandages on his shoulder and arm. His eyes, wide with pain and something else, maybe fear, locked onto Sarah's face as she approached. "Hey there, warrior," Sarah said softly, her voice carrying the warmth of a southern summer despite the clinical surroundings. Her accent, a gentle Georgia drawl that 2 decades in the Navy couldn't quite erase, seemed to ease the tension in the boy's jaw. "I'm Sarah. Let's take a look at what we're working with." She assessed the wounds with the quick, confident evaluation of someone who'd done this in far worse conditions than a well-equipped hospital. Her fingers were gentle but sure, peeling back bandages, checking for arterial involvement, noting the pattern of the shrapnel entry. "Ma'am," the young Marine said through gritted teeth, "were you really at Fallujah?" Sarah glanced up, meeting his eyes with a slight smile. "Who told you that?" "Gunny Rodriguez. He said if we ever ended up at Veterans Memorial, we should pray we get Nurse Reid. Said you pulled him out of a firefight and stitched him up while mortars were still coming in." "Gunny talks too much," Sarah replied, but her smile widened. She threaded the suture needle with steady hands. "This is going to sting, sweetheart. You can squeeze my arm if you need to." "I'm good, ma'am." "They always say that," she murmured, beginning the careful work of closing the deepest laceration. The boy was right, though. Sarah Reid had been at Fallujah. She'd been at Kandahar, Ramadi, and a dozen other places whose names Americans saw on the news but couldn't imagine in their worst nightmares. For 20 years, Lieutenant Commander Sarah Reid had served as a Navy nurse, most of that time attached to Marine units in combat zones. She'd held dying boys' hands as they whispered messages for mothers they'd never see again. She'd performed emergency surgeries in bombed-out buildings with only headlamps for light. She'd worked 72-hour shifts during mass casualty events, sleeping in 15-minute increments between patients. And then, 10 years ago, everything changed. The casualty notification officers had arrived at her door on a Sunday morning. Her husband, Marine Corps Captain Thomas Reid, killed by an IED outside Helmand Province. Gone in an instant, leaving her with 3 sons, Michael, 17, David, 15, and James, just 12. Sarah had buried her husband with full military honors, stood stoic as they folded the flag, and then returned to work the next week because wounded Marines still needed her, and sitting at home wouldn't bring Tom back. Her sons had watched their mother's quiet strength and decided, one by one, to follow their father into the Corps. Now Michael was a lieutenant colonel at Quantico, David a major at Camp Lejeune, and James a captain leading reconnaissance missions in the Pacific. She was terrified for them every single day, but she was also impossibly proud. "All done," Sarah announced, tying off the final suture. "You're going to have a nice scar to show off, but you'll heal up just fine." The young Marine looked at his neatly stitched shoulder with something like awe. "Thank you, ma'am, really." "Thank you for your service," she replied, the words automatic but sincere. She'd said them 10,000 times, and she meant them every single time. As she stripped off her gloves and updated his chart, the ER's head physician, Dr. Marcus Webb, approached with a weary smile. "Sarah, you've been here for 16 hours. Go home." Just wanted to finish with, "Home, that's an order." His expression softened. "Besides, you know what tomorrow is." Sarah's face clouded briefly. The staff meeting. The new CEO was coming to streamline operations, whatever corporate doublespeak that meant. She'd heard rumors from other hospitals in the Apex healthcare network. Budget cuts, policy changes, a focus on financial efficiency. "I'll be there," she said quietly. Walking to her car in the pre-dawn darkness, Sarah passed the memorial wall in the hospital's courtyard. Hundreds of names engraved in marble, veterans who'd been treated here over the decades, who'd passed on, who were remembered. Tom's name was there too, added 5 years ago when the hospital expanded the memorial. She touched his name gently, a ritual she performed whenever she worked the night shift. "The boys are doing good, baby," she whispered. "Really good. Michael might make colonel soon. David's company respects the hell out of him. And James has your reckless courage which terrifies me daily." A cool breeze rustled the memorial flags. "Big changes coming to the hospital. New CEO, probably gonna make waves," she smiled sadly. "You know me, I'll fight for these kids as long as they let me." She had no idea how prophetic those words would be, or that in less than 24 hours, her quiet life of service would explode into something that would test everything she believed in, and reveal just how many lives she'd touched along the way. Sarah climbed into her 15-year-old Honda, the one Tom had helped her pick out before his last deployment, and drove home through empty San Diego streets, thinking only of getting a few hours of sleep before the meeting that would change everything. Behind her, the hospital stood silent and steady, a beacon of care for those who'd served. Inside those walls, hundreds of Marines had been saved by her skilled hands. Soon, they would return the favor. Marcus Holloway's Italian leather shoes clicked against the polished hospital floors with a rhythm that sounded almost aggressive. At 46, he was what business magazines called a turnaround specialist, a corporate fixer brought in to transform struggling facilities into profit machines. His track record was impressive. 7 hospitals in 5 years, each one showing a 40% increase in revenue within 18 months. What those magazines didn't mention were the human costs, the nurses laid off, the programs cut, the patients turned away. Holloway didn't care. Numbers were clean, people were messy. "Mr. Holloway, welcome to Veterans Memorial Hospital." Administrator Janet Foster extended her hand, her smile tight with apprehension. She'd been running this facility for 12 years and had heard the stories about Apex Healthcare's new CEO. "Mrs. Foster." His handshake was brief, almost dismissive. "Let's skip the pleasantries. I've reviewed your financials. They're abysmal." Janet's smile faltered. "Sir, we serve a unique population. Many of our patients are uninsured veterans who are a drain on resources." Holloway didn't break stride as he walked through the corridor, eyes scanning everything with cold calculation. "This facility operates at a 23% loss margin. Unacceptable." "With respect, Mr. Holloway, this hospital was founded specifically to serve veterans. Our mission statement." "Your mission statement doesn't pay the bills." He stopped abruptly, turning to face her. His eyes were the color of slate, hard and unyielding. "I've scheduled a mandatory staff meeting for 2 p.m. Every department head, every senior nurse, every physician. I want them to understand the new reality." Janet felt her stomach drop. What new reality would that be? Holloway's smile was all teeth, no warmth. "The one where this hospital starts making money, or I shut it down and sell the property to developers. San Diego real estate is quite valuable." The conference room felt too small for the 60 staff members crammed inside at 2 p.m. sharp. Nurses in scrubs, doctors in white coats, administrators in business casual, all wore expressions ranging from curious to deeply concerned. Sarah Reid sat near the back, having come straight from a double shift. Her body ached, but her mind was alert. She'd asked around about Marcus Holloway. The stories weren't encouraging. "Thank you all for coming." Holloway stood at the front, a PowerPoint presentation glowing behind him. The first slide read, "Efficiency through Excellence, the new Veterans Memorial." Sarah noticed he'd already removed "Veterans" from the rebranded name on subsequent slides. "Let me be direct," Holloway began, his voice carrying the practiced authority of someone used to being obeyed. "This hospital is hemorrhaging money. Your current operating model is unsustainable, inefficient, and frankly, outdated." Murmurs rippled through the room. Dr. Webb leaned forward. "Mr. Holloway, could you clarify what you mean by?" "I mean that treating patients without insurance verification is costing this facility millions annually." Holloway clicked to the next slide, showing charts with red numbers. "Effective immediately, we're implementing a strict pre-treatment insurance verification protocol. No exceptions." The murmurs grew louder. Sarah felt her jaw tighten. "Furthermore," Holloway continued, raising his voice slightly, "we're eliminating several programs that don't generate revenue. The Veteran Support Group will be discontinued. The PTSD counseling program will be outsourced to a cheaper third-party provider, and the overnight crisis hotline will be shut down." "Those programs save lives," someone called out. "Those programs cost money we don't have," Holloway shot back. "This is a hospital, not a charity." Sarah's hand went up. Holloway's eyes found her, irritation flickering across his features. "Yes, Ms. Reid, Sarah Reid. I'm a senior nurse in the trauma unit." She stood slowly, her voice calm but firm. "Mr. Holloway, with all due respect, this hospital was built on a promise to serve those who served our country. Many of our patients are veterans who fell through the cracks of the VA system. They don't have insurance because they're homeless or dealing with PTSD, or—" "I understand you have sentimental attachments to these patients, Nurse Reid," Holloway interrupted, his tone dripping with condescension. "But sentiment doesn't balance budgets. If these veterans can't pay for services, they can go to the VA or county facilities." "The VA has a 6-month waiting list for most services," Sarah countered, her southern accent thickening slightly the way it always did when she was upset. "County facilities are overcrowded and underfunded. We're often their only option." "Then perhaps they should have made better life choices." The words hung in the air like poison gas. The room went deadly silent. Sarah's eyes narrowed. "Better life choices, sir. Many of these men and women have Purple Hearts. They've lost limbs, watched friends die, suffered traumatic brain injuries defending this country. Their life choice was to serve while people like you—" "People like me?" Holloway's face flushed red. "People like me who actually understand how to run a business, who make the tough decisions so bleeding hearts like you can keep your jobs." He stepped closer to the edge of the stage. "Let me make something crystal clear to everyone in this room. I don't care if your patients storm the beaches at Normandy. I don't care if they have a wall full of medals. No insurance verification, no treatment, period." "That's a violation of medical ethics," Dr. Webb interjected. "That's the new policy," Holloway snapped. "Anyone who doesn't like it can submit their resignation. I'll have it processed within the hour." Sarah remained standing, her face a mask of controlled fury. Around her, other staff members exchanged horrified glances. This wasn't just policy change. This was a complete betrayal of everything the hospital stood for. "Are we clear, Nurse Reid?" Holloway's voice was sharp, challenging. Sarah met his gaze without flinching. 20 years in combat zones had taught her not to back down from bullies, even ones in expensive suits. "Crystal clear, sir," she said quietly. "I understand exactly who you are." Something dangerous flashed in Holloway's eyes, but he turned back to the presentation. "Good. Now, let's discuss staffing cuts. I'm eliminating 15 nursing positions and 3 physician roles. The termination list will be posted by end of week. The meeting continued for another agonizing hour. With each slide, each new policy, the staff's morale sank lower. Programs that had helped thousands of veterans were being dismantled. Protocols that had saved lives were being replaced with profit-driven bureaucracy. When it finally ended, staff filed out in stunned silence. Sarah remained in her seat, staring at nothing, her mind racing. Dr. Webb approached her. "Sarah, be careful. Holloway's not someone you want as an enemy." "Too late for that," she murmured. "I'm serious. I've seen his type before. He'll look for any excuse to get rid of people who challenge him." Sarah stood, gathering her bag. "Marcus, I've faced down insurgents in Fallujah. I've performed triage during mortar attacks. I've held dying Marines in my arms." She looked at him with eyes that had seen too much to be afraid of a corporate bully. "I'm not scared of a man in a suit who's never served anything but his own bank account." "That's what worries me," Dr. Webb said softly. As Sarah walked out of the conference room, she passed a memorial board displaying photos of veterans the hospital had served over the years. Their faces, young and old, scarred and whole, proud and humble, reminded her why she did this work. She pulled out her phone and texted her sons, "Big changes at work. Might get interesting. Love you boys." Michael responded first, "You okay, Mom?" "Always am," she typed back. "Reid's don't quit." She had no idea that within 24 hours, she'd need every ounce of that Reid family stubbornness. Or that Marcus Holloway's arrogance would lead to a moment that would change everything. The emergency room had settled into its usual late-night rhythm when Sarah heard the automatic doors burst open at 11:47 p.m. She just finished stitching up a teenager's skateboard injury when the commotion started. "Please, please, they're coming for me." The voice was raw with terror, male, desperate. "Can't let them find me." Sarah's head snapped up. Years of experience had taught her to recognize different kinds of fear. This wasn't physical pain. This was the primal panic of a mind trapped in a war zone that existed only in memory. Miguel Torres stumbled into the like a man fleeing invisible demons. His clothes were dirty and torn, his graying hair matted with sweat despite the cool San Diego night. At 43, he looked 20 years older. His eyes darted around the room, seeing threats that weren't there, lost somewhere between the streets of San Diego and the streets of Fallujah. "Miguel," Sarah recognized him immediately. He'd been coming to the hospital for 3 years, always in crisis, always uninsured, always ashamed. She treated him a dozen times, learned his story in fragments. Marine Corps veteran, 2 tours in Iraq, honorable discharge. Then the slow slide into homelessness as PTSD shredded his ability to hold a job, maintain relationships, or distinguish past from present. She moved toward him quickly but carefully, hands visible, voice low and calm. "Miguel, honey, it's Sarah. You're safe. You're at the hospital." "The building, it's gonna collapse." His hands shook violently. "Gotta get everyone out, the mortars." "No mortars here, sweetheart, just me and you." Sarah gently guided him toward an empty bay, her touch light but grounding. "Let's sit down, okay? Nice and slow." The young resident on duty, Dr. Amy Chen, appeared at Sarah's side with a medical kit. She'd worked with Sarah long enough to know the protocol for Miguel's episodes. Vitals first, then sedation if necessary, then evaluation. Sarah was reaching for the blood pressure cuff when a voice cut through the moment like a blade. "Stop right there." Marcus Holloway strode across the ER floor, his suit jacket removed, tie loosened, but his authority fully intact. He'd been in his office reviewing late-night admission reports, looking for violations of his new policies. When the intake system flagged Torres Miguel, no insurance, he'd come down personally. "Mr. Holloway," Sarah said without looking up, wrapping the cuff around Miguel's arm. "This is a medical situation. I need you to step back." "I need to see his insurance card." Holloway's voice was cold steel. He doesn't have insurance. He's having a PTSD episode and requires immediate. Then he needs to go to the county facility. Holloway pulled out his phone, already typing. I've been clear about the new policy. No insurance verification, no treatment. Sarah's hand stilled. She turned slowly to face him, her voice dangerously quiet. This man is a Marine Corps veteran having a mental health crisis. I'm treating him. You're violating hospital policy. I'm following medical ethics. Miguel's breathing accelerated, his eyes growing wider as the argument escalated around him. His hands clutched at the gurney rails. They're fighting, always fighting before the bombs, always. Miguel, look at me. Sarah tried to redirect his attention, but Holloway stepped closer. Nurse Reid, I'm ordering you to step away from this patient immediately. And I'm refusing that order. Sarah's southern accent sharpened. Sir, you may not understand this, but when someone is having an acute PTSD episode, they need immediate intervention. Every second we waste arguing increases his risk of. What I understand, Holloway interrupted, his face flushing red, is that you seem to think you run this hospital. You don't, I do. Then you should understand that turning away a veteran in crisis is not only unethical, it's dangerous. What's dangerous is a nurse who thinks her bleeding heart supersedes hospital policy. His voice rose, attracting attention from across the ER. Other nurses paused their work. Security guards turned their heads. The ceiling-mounted cameras continued their silent recording. Sarah's jaw tightened, but she turned back to Miguel, who was now rocking back and forth, muttering about IEDs and coordinates. Dr. Chen, I need 5 milligrams of. Holloway's hand clamped down on Sarah's shoulder, spinning her around. Don't you dare ignore me. Sarah pulled free, eyes blazing. Take your hands off me. You're fired, effective immediately. Then fire me after I save this man's life. She turned back to Miguel. The rage that crossed Marcus Holloway's face was something primal. Here was a man who'd built a career on absolute control, on having people jump when he spoke, on never being challenged. And this small-town nurse with her southern drawl and her outdated sense of duty was making him look weak in front of staff. His hand moved before his brain could stop it. The slap echoed through the emergency room like a gunshot. Sarah's head snapped to the side, her cheek blooming crimson where his palm had connected. The ER went silent, the kind of silence that follows something unforgivable. Monitors beeped, fluorescent lights hummed, but not a single person moved. Sarah straightened slowly, touching her burning cheek. When she turned back to Holloway, her eyes held something he'd never seen before. Not fear, not submission, but a cold, absolute certainty. You just made a terrible mistake, she said quietly. The only mistake was hearing people like you. Holloway's hand was shaking, but whether from rage or the dawning realization of what he'd done, no one could tell. Get out, now, or I'll have security throw you out. Sarah held his gaze for one more moment. Then she turned to Dr. Chen. Amy, Miguel needs 5 milligrams of lorazepam IM, then a psych consult. His charts in the system under TORS, Miguel, DOB November 1981. His triggers are loud noises and arguments. Keep the lights low. Sarah, Dr. Chen's eyes were wide with shock. Take care of him. Sarah's voice was soft but firm. She looked down at Miguel, who had curled into himself, hands over his ears. Miguel, sweetheart, Dr. Chen is going to help you, okay? You're safe. She gathered her bag, maintaining her dignity even as her cheek throbbed. As she walked past the nurse's station, she paused at the charge nurse. Document everything in the incident report, everything. Already doing it, the nurse whispered, fingers flying across the keyboard. Sarah walked through the ER, past the stunned faces of colleagues who'd worked with her for years, past the security guards who looked away, ashamed, past the patients who sensed something significant had just happened. Marcus Holloway watched her go, his hand still tingling from the impact. Around him, staff members stared with expressions of shock and disgust. He'd crossed a line, and somewhere in the back of his mind, alarm bells were starting to ring. "What are you all looking at?" he barked. "Get back to work." They moved but slowly, reluctantly, and in their eyes he saw something that money and power couldn't control. Contempt. Above it all, the security cameras had captured everything. Every word, every gesture, every second of Marcus Holloway raising his hand to a nurse who'd spent 20 years serving her country. The footage was already automatically uploading to the hospital's secure server. Within 12 hours, it would be everywhere. Sarah's hands shook as she tried to fit her key into the front door lock. 3 attempts. On the 4th try, the key slid home, and she stumbled into her small bungalow in Pacific Beach, the one she and Tom had bought 23 years ago when it was all they could afford on military pay. The house was dark and quiet, too quiet. She dropped her bag by the door and walked to the bathroom on autopilot. The face in the mirror stopped her cold. Her left cheek was swollen, darkening into an ugly purple bruise that spread from her cheekbone to her jaw, a thin split in the skin where Holloway's ring had caught her. Sarah touched it gently and felt the sting all over again. But it wasn't the physical pain that made her sink onto the edge of the bathtub, head in her hands. It was the humiliation, the violation. The fact that she'd spent 20 years in war zones without anyone laying a hand on her in anger, only to be assaulted in the hospital where she'd healed thousands. "Don't cry," she whispered to herself. "Reid women don't cry." But the tears came anyway, hot and angry, streaming down her face as 30 years of holding it together finally cracked. For Tom, killed in a war that took too many good men. For her boys, who she sent off to serve knowing they might not come home. For every broken veteran she'd tried to save. For Miguel, still trapped in his nightmare while she'd been forced to walk away. Her phone buzzed. She ignored it. It buzzed again and again. Finally, she pulled it from her pocket. The screen showed a familiar name, Captain James Reid. Sarah almost didn't answer. Her youngest son had a sixth sense about her. He always knew when something was wrong. She'd managed to hide most of her struggles over the years, the financial strain of raising 3 boys alone, the nights she cried herself to sleep after particularly bad days at the field hospital, the crushing loneliness after Tom died. But she'd never been able to hide anything from James. The phone kept ringing. If she didn't answer, he'd just keep calling. Or worse, he'd call his brothers, and then all 3 of them would be worried. "Hey, baby," she answered, trying to inject normalcy into her voice. "Mom." His voice was warm, the slight rasp that reminded her so much of Tom. "Just calling for our weekly check-in. How's my favorite nurse?" "Oh, you know, same old, same old." The lie tasted bitter. Silence on the other end. "Too long, Mom." "Yes, sweetheart." "What happened?" "Nothing happened. I'm just tired, double shift in." "Mom." His voice changed, became the tone he used with his Marines, the one that demanded truth. "I can hear it in your voice. Something's wrong. What happened?" Sarah closed her eyes. She'd taught her boys never to lie, which meant she couldn't either. Just trouble at work. New CEO, policy changes, you know how it is. "What kind of trouble?" "James, really, it's nothing I can't." "Mom, I'm not hanging up until you tell me what's wrong. I've got all night." A pause. "Are you crying?" "Damn it, I'm fine." "You're crying. Mom, talk to me, please." The concern in his voice broke something in her. The whole story spilled out. Holloway's policies, the staff meeting, Miguel's episode, the confrontation. When she got to the part about the slap, she heard James's sharp intake of breath. "He hit you." His voice was deadly quiet. "James. He put his hands on you and hit you." "Baby, listen, I don't want you to." "Where is he? Where does this piece of—" James caught himself, his breathing harsh over the phone. "Mom, give me his full name right now." "James Reid, you will do no such thing. I'm handling this through proper channels. I'll file a report, talk to HR, maybe get a lawyer." "A lawyer?" James's voice rose. "Mom, he assaulted you, and you were trying to help a Marine. Do you understand what you're saying?" Sarah could hear him moving, the sounds of a barracks room in the background. "James, where are you going?" "I'm calling David and Michael." "No, James, please, I don't want this to become a big thing. I just need to process and—" "Mom, stop." His voice cracked slightly. "Do you know how many times your name has been mentioned in my presence? How many Marines I've met who served with you, who you treated, who you saved?" Sarah was quiet. "Last month I met a gunnery sergeant at a joint exercise. Older guy, must have been close to retirement. When he found out I was James Reid, you know what he did? He actually teared up. Said Lieutenant Commander Sarah Reid pulled him out of a burning vehicle in Ramadi and kept him alive for 6 hours until medevac could arrive. He showed me pictures of his grandkids and said he never would have met them without you." "James." "I hear stories like that constantly, Mom. Do you understand? You're not just my mother, you're a legend. And some corporate asshole put his hands on you for trying to help one of our own." Sarah heard keyboard clicks in the background. "What are you doing?" "Sending an email. The Marine Corps has something you don't have." "What's that?" "A network, a brotherhood, and that brotherhood doesn't forget its own." Within 5 minutes of hanging up with his mother, Captain James Reid had sent encrypted messages to his brothers. Major David Reid was in a planning meeting at Camp Lejeune when his phone vibrated. He read the message once, twice, then excused himself from the room with an expression that made his fellow officers nervous. Lieutenant Colonel Michael Reid was reviewing training reports at Quantico when his alert chimed. He read it standing up, and his hands slowly clenched into fists. 3 Reid brothers, separated by thousands of miles, united by one message. Mom was assaulted. CEO named Marcus Holloway. Veterans Memorial Hospital, San Diego. She needs us. But the brothers didn't stop there. David called his company first sergeant, a crusty veteran named Rodriguez who'd served 2 tours with Sarah in Afghanistan. "First sergeant, I need you to spread the word. Nurse Reid. You remember her?" "Sir, everyone remembers Nurse Reid. What's wrong?" When David explained, Rodriguez's response was immediate. "I'll make some calls." Michael reached out to his battalion commander, who'd had 3 Marines saved by Sarah during the Kandahar deployment. The commander's response: "Give me 1 hour." James contacted his platoon, many of whom had heard stories about the legendary Navy nurse who'd kept a Marine patrol alive after an ambush in hostile territory. The calls spread like wildfire through military networks, encrypted emails, secure messaging apps, phone calls at midnight. Each message contained the same essential information. Sarah Reid had been assaulted while trying to help a Marine veteran. She needed support. By 3 a.m., the story had reached 3 generals. General Robert Matheson, retired, living in Virginia, woke to his phone ringing. The caller was a Marine he'd commanded 15 years ago. "Sir, sorry to wake you, but you need to know something about Lieutenant Commander Reid." Matheson sat up instantly. "Sarah, is she all right?" When he heard the story, he was quiet for a long moment. Then, "I owe that woman my life. She pulled me from a burning Humvee in Ramadi when everyone else had written me off. What do you need?" General Patricia Chen was still at her desk at Camp Pendleton when the message reached her through her aide. She remembered Sarah from a brutal Afghan winter when Sarah had kept her logistics unit operational through a meningitis outbreak that should have decimated them. General William Bull Harrison, the most decorated Marine of his generation, received the news from his son, a son who would have died at 19 if not for Sarah Reid's refusal to give up during a mass casualty event. 3 generals, 3 different locations, 3 shared memories of a Navy nurse who'd gone above and beyond. They conferenced in at 4 a.m. "Gentlemen," Matheson said, his voice gravelly with age and anger. "I believe we have a situation that requires our immediate attention." "Agreed," Chen replied. "What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking," Harrison said slowly, "that in 24 hours we pay our respects to Nurse Reid, in person, in uniform, with cameras present." "I'll make the arrangements," Matheson confirmed. "And the CEO?" Chen asked. Harrison's smile was cold. "By the time we're done, Marcus Holloway will wish he'd never heard the name Sarah Reid." Marcus Holloway's phone started ringing at 5:47 a.m. He ignored it, rolling over in his king-sized bed in his luxury downtown condo. It rang again, and again. By the sixth call, he grabbed it with a curse. "This better be important." "Mr. Holloway, it's Janet Foster. We have a situation." The hospital administrator's voice was tight with stress. "You need to get down here, now." "It's not even 6 in the morning. Whatever it is can wait until." "Sir, there are veterans outside the hospital, in uniform, a lot of them." Holloway sat up. "So call security and have them removed." "They're not breaking any laws, they're just standing there, and sir, there's video." "What video?" "A pause, of last night, of you and Nurse Reid. It's spreading." Holloway's blood went cold. "What do you mean, spreading?" "It's on every military forum, social media group, veteran network. I've had 17 media calls in the last hour asking for comment. Sir, you need to see this." 20 minutes later, Holloway stood in his office watching the security footage on his computer. There he was, clear as day, slapping Sarah Reid across the face. The audio picked up everything: his dismissive tone, her calm professionalism, his final violent act. How did this get out? His voice was dangerously quiet. Janet Foster stood near the door, looking like she wanted to be anywhere else. "The footage automatically uploads to our secure server. Someone with access must have downloaded it." "Find out who, fire them." "Sir, I don't think that's our biggest problem right now." Holloway pulled up his email, 47 messages, most marked urgent. The first was from Apex Healthcare's board chairman: "Call me immediately. Do not speak to press." The second was from the hospital's legal team: "We need to discuss immediate damage control." The third was from a reporter at the San Diego Tribune, seeking comment on assault allegations. He scrolled through social media on his phone. The video was everywhere. But it wasn't just the video, it was the comments, thousands of them, from active duty service members and veterans. "That's Nurse Reid. She saved my life in Kandahar. She treated my entire unit after an IED attack, worked 48 hours straight. My brother would be dead if not for her. Who does this suit think he is? She's a legend. This is how we treat our heroes." The hashtag Justice for Nurse Reid was already trending. "Sir," Janet said quietly, "you should look outside." Holloway walked to the window. The sight below made his stomach drop. Dozens of veterans lined the sidewalk in front of the hospital. More were arriving by the minute. They wore dress uniforms, some with chests full of medals. Others wore Marine Corps jackets, Navy shirts, Army caps. Some were young, fresh-faced. Others were elderly, some in wheelchairs, some with prosthetic limbs. They weren't chanting or protesting. They were simply standing at attention, forming a human wall of silent judgment. A few held signs: "We stand with Nurse Reid and veterans remember." News vans were already setting up across the street. "Make them leave," Holloway demanded. "They're on public property. They have every right to be there." "Then ignore them, get back to work, business as usual." But it wasn't business as usual. By 8 a.m., 3 major board members had called emergency meetings. By 9 a.m., 2 hospital sponsors announced they were reviewing their partnership with Apex Healthcare. By 10 a.m., the hospital's main donors, many of them veterans organizations, had issued a joint statement condemning the assault and demanding Holloway's immediate termination. Holloway sat in his office, watching his carefully constructed career implode in real time. His phone buzzed with a text from the board chairman. "Do not make any statements. Lawyer up. This is bad." How bad could it be? He'd hit an insubordinate employee. Yes, it looked bad on video, but surely once people understood the context, the policy violations, His thoughts were interrupted by his assistant. "Sir, there are 3 reporters in the lobby asking for a statement." "Tell them no comment." They're asking specifically about Nurse Reid's military service record. Apparently she has quite an extensive. "I don't care if she personally won World War II. No comment." But the reporters had done their homework. By noon, Sarah's service record was public knowledge: 20 years in the Navy, 2 Silver Stars for Valor, 3 Navy and Marine Corps Commendation Medals, service in every major conflict from Bosnia to Afghanistan, the Angel of Fallujah, some Marines called her. And Marcus Holloway had slapped her on camera for trying to help a Marine veteran. The optics were devastating. At Camp Lejeune, Major David Reid stood before his company. "Listen up, Marines. Some of you have heard the rumors. Yes, Nurse Sarah Reid is my mother. Yes, she was assaulted last night while trying to treat a Marine veteran having a PTSD crisis." The company erupted in angry murmurs. David held up a hand. "I'm not asking any of you to do anything. But if any Marine in this company happens to be near San Diego in the next 24 hours and wants to pay respects to a Navy nurse who's saved countless Marine lives, well, I can't stop you from exercising your First Amendment rights on your personal time." By afternoon, Marines from Camp Pendleton were requesting personal time. Sailors from Naval Base San Diego were doing the same. Word spread to Army and Air Force bases. The gathering outside Veterans Memorial Hospital swelled from dozens to hundreds. At Quantico, Lieutenant Colonel Michael Reid made a phone call to the Marine Corps Times. "You want a story? I'll give you a story. My mother, Navy Lieutenant Commander Sarah Reid, served 20 years patching up Marines in combat zones. Last night, she was assaulted by a corporate CEO for trying to help a homeless Marine veteran. Here's her service record." The article went live within hours. At sea, Captain James Reid sent a message to his reconnaissance team. "Personal matter. My mother needs support. Details attached." Within minutes, his entire unit had shared the story across their networks. The storm was building, but the real thunder hadn't arrived yet. In Virginia, General Robert Matheson packed his dress blues and booked a flight to San Diego. At Camp Pendleton, General Patricia Chen made arrangements for a Marine Honor Guard and transportation. In Maryland, General William Bull Harrison contacted his media relations team. "I need cameras," he said simply. "Lots of them." They compared notes in a conference call. 24 hours, Matheson confirmed. "We arrived together full dress with honors." "The media will eat this up," Chen noted. "Good," Harrison replied. "Let them. It's time people understood what it means to disrespect someone who spent their life serving those who serve." "What about the CEO?" Matheson asked. Harrison's laugh was harsh. "By the time we're done, he'll be lucky to get a job managing a parking lot." Meanwhile, at her small bungalow, Sarah Reid sat in her kitchen drinking coffee, unaware of the maelstrom she'd unleashed. Her phone had been ringing constantly. Reporters, colleagues, veterans she'd treated years ago, but she'd turned it off. She'd filed a police report, documented her injuries, contacted a lawyer, done everything by the book. Now she just felt tired. A knock at her door made her jump. She peered through the window and saw her neighbor, Mrs. Chen, an elderly Korean War veteran's widow. "Sarah, honey, you need to turn on the news." "I really don't want to." "Turn it on, Channel 8. Sarah reluctantly switched on the television. Her own face filled the screen, her official Navy portrait from 20 years ago, young and proud in her uniform. The headline read, Decorated Navy nurse assaulted by hospital CEO. The reporter's voice was grave. Sarah Reid served 20 years treating wounded service members in combat zones. Last night, she was assaulted while trying to help a Marine veteran. Tonight, the military community is responding. The screen cut to footage of the veterans outside the hospital, then to interviews with Marines she'd treated, then to her sons, all three in uniform, speaking about their mother's dedication. Sarah's hand went to her mouth. Oh no, the boys, they weren't supposed to. Honey, Mrs. Chen said gently, did you really think they'd stay quiet? The report continued. And in a developing story, 3 Marine generals have announced they'll be visiting San Diego tomorrow to honor Nurse Reid personally. Sarah sat down heavily. This was spiraling beyond anything she'd imagined. Her phone buzzed. A text from Michael, Mom, we love you, let us help. Then David, you've spent 20 years protecting us, our turn. Then James, Reid family doesn't back down, Dad would be proud. Sarah closed her eyes, tears streaming down her bruised face. She tried to handle this quietly, professionally. Her boys had other plans. And so, apparently, did 3 generals. Tomorrow was going to change everything. Sarah woke at 5 a.m. out of habit, her body clock permanently set to military time despite a decade of civilian life. Her cheek throbbed with a dull ache. The bruise had deepened overnight to a mottled purple-black that no amount of concealer could hide. She made coffee and tried to ignore her phone, which had been buzzing non-stop since she turned it back on. Text messages numbered in the hundreds. Voicemails from reporters, colleagues, veterans she hadn't heard from in years. Even her congressman's office had called. At 7 a.m., there was a knock at her door. She opened it to find her 3 sons standing on her porch in full dress uniform, their faces a mixture of concern and barely controlled fury. Boys, her voice broke, what are you doing here? Where else would we be? Michael, her oldest, pulled her into a gentle hug, careful of her injured face. David and James wrapped their arms around both of them. Mom, James said quietly, we're not letting you go through this alone. You all took leave, but your duties are important, David finished, but not as important as this, not as important as you. They sat in her small kitchen, the same table where she'd helped them with homework, where they'd shared meals after Tom's funeral, where she'd sent each of them off to boot camp with tears she'd only let fall after they'd left. 3 generals are coming today, Michael said, watching her face. Did you know? Sarah shook her head. Generals don't make house calls for nurses. They do for you, James said. Mom, do you really not understand what you mean to people? How many lives you've saved? Before Sarah could answer, her phone rang. An unfamiliar number with a Virginia area code. Ms. Reid, this is General Robert Matheson. We met in Ramadi 2006. Sarah's breath caught. General Matheson, yes sir, I remember, the Humvee fire. You pulled me out of that vehicle when everyone else had given up on me. You kept me alive for 6 hours with minimal supplies and insurgents firing on your position. His voice was thick with emotion. Ma'am, I heard what happened to you. I'm currently en route to San Diego with Generals Chen and Harrison. We'll be arriving at Veterans Memorial Hospital at exactly 11:47 a.m., 24 hours after you were assaulted. Sir, that's really not necessary. With respect, ma'am, it absolutely is. We're coming to honor you. The media will be there. We want the world to see what happens when someone disrespects a military hero. I'm not a hero, sir. I just did my job. That's what heroes always say. A pause. Ms. Reid, will you be there, at the hospital? Sarah looked at her sons, all watching her with pride in their eyes. Yes, sir, I'll be there. By 11 a.m., Veterans Memorial Hospital was surrounded. The crowd of veterans had grown to over 500, creating a corridor of honor from the street to the main entrance. News helicopters circled overhead. Every major network had crews on scene. Marcus Holloway watched from his office window, his face pale. His lawyer sat beside him, along with two board members who'd flown in overnight for crisis management. "They can't do this," Holloway muttered. "It's a publicity stunt." "It's three Marine generals honoring a decorated veteran," his lawyer replied flatly. "There's nothing we can do to stop it. Our focus needs to be on damage control." "Damage control? I'm the victim here. That nurse violated policy." "Mr. Holloway," the board chairman's voice was ice. "You assaulted an employee on camera, a decorated military veteran, while she was trying to help a Marine in crisis. There is no universe in which you come out of this looking good." At 11:45 a.m., three black SUVs arrived with military police escorts. The vehicles stopped at the hospital entrance, and the crowd of veterans snapped to attention in perfect unison. The doors opened. General Robert Matheson emerged first, 72 years old but ramrod straight in his dress blues, his chest heavy with medals earned over 4 decades of service. His silver hair gleamed in the San Diego sun. General Patricia Chen followed, the highest-ranking female Marine in the Pacific Theater, her uniform immaculate, her bearing commanding absolute respect. General William Bull Harrison came last, a living legend, the most decorated Marine of his generation. At 80, he moved with the careful dignity of a man who'd earned every step. Behind them, a Marine honor guard in dress blues formed up, rifles at present arms. The cameras captured everything. Sarah arrived with her sons just as the generals were approaching the entrance. She tried to dress professionally, simple black pants, a modest blouse, but nothing could hide the bruise on her face. "Mom ready?" Michael asked. "I don't know what I'm supposed to do," she whispered. "Just be yourself," David said. "That's all they want to see." The generals spotted her immediately. They walked toward her in formation, and Sarah instinctively straightened, her Navy training kicking in despite 20 years of civilian life. "Lieutenant Commander Sarah Reid," General Matheson's voice carried across the suddenly silent crowd. "Permission to approach, ma'am." Sarah's eyes widened. A general asking a retired lieutenant commander for permission. "Sir, that's not, you don't need to." "Permission granted or denied, ma'am." His eyes twinkled slightly, but his face remained serious. "Permission granted, sir," she said softly. The three generals approached and, in perfect synchronization, saluted her. Sarah's hand came up automatically, returning the salute even as tears began streaming down her face. "Ma'am," General Chen spoke next, her voice clear and strong, "we're here today to honor your service to the United States Navy and to the countless Marines whose lives you've saved over 2 decades of dedication." General Harrison stepped forward, holding a wooden case. He opened it to reveal the Civilian Service Medal, the highest honor given to civilians who serve the military community. "Sarah Reid," his gravelly voice commanded attention, "for extraordinary service to the United States Marine Corps, for valor under fire, for dedication beyond measure, and for embodying the very best of what it means to serve, we present you with this medal." He placed it around her neck. The crowd erupted in applause. Sarah touched the medal with shaking fingers, completely overwhelmed. Her sons stood at attention behind her, fighting their own tears. General Matheson addressed the media next. "Yesterday, this woman, who has saved hundreds of Marine lives, who has served in every major conflict for 20 years, who represents the very best of American dedication, was assaulted by a corporate CEO for trying to help a Marine veteran in crisis." His voice hardened. "The United States Marine Corps does not forget its own. We protect those who protect us. We honor those who honor our service members. And we will not tolerate disrespect towards someone who has given everything to keep Marines alive." General Chen added, "We're calling for a full investigation and immediate action against those responsible. Sarah Reid is a hero. She deserves to be treated as such. The media shouted questions. Cameras flashed. But Sarah only saw the faces around her, veterans she'd treated, some she recognized, some she didn't, all of them looking at her with gratitude and respect. A young Marine in a wheelchair rolled forward. Sarah recognized him. She'd treated him after an IED took his legs in Helmand Province. "Ma'am," he said, "you told me I'd walk again. I said you were crazy. You said maybe, but you'll roll with dignity. You stayed with me through 18 surgeries." His voice cracked. "This is for you." He handed her a folded American flag. "From all of us," he said, "the ones you saved." Sarah took the flag, clutching it to her chest as she finally broke down completely. Michael's arms came around her, then David's, then James's. Her boys holding her up, just as she'd held them up their entire lives. In his office, Marcus Holloway watched the scene on live television. His lawyer was already drafting his resignation letter. The board members were on their phones, doing damage control. He'd slapped a nurse. But he'd really struck a legend. And legends, he was learning, don't fight back alone. They have armies. The emergency board meeting of Apex Healthcare Systems convened at 2 p.m. in a crisis conference room in downtown San Diego. 9 board members sat around a polished mahogany table, their faces grim. Marcus Holloway sat at the opposite end, his expensive lawyer beside him, looking like a man watching his execution. Board Chairman Robert Sterling didn't waste time on pleasantries. As of 1 hour ago, Apex Healthcare stock has dropped 32%. We've lost 4 major investors. 7 hospitals in our network are facing sponsor withdrawals. Senator Martinez has called for a congressional investigation into our veteran care policies. He slid a tablet across the table showing news coverage. Every major network was running the story. The image of 3 generals honoring Sarah Reid while her bruised face told its own story had gone viral. Hashtags Justice for Nurse Reid and #Heroes Deserve Respect were trending worldwide. "This," Sterling continued, his voice cold as winter, "is the worst PR disaster in company history, and it's entirely preventable." "I was enforcing policy," Holloway said, but his voice lacked its usual confidence. "She violated direct orders. You assaulted a decorated military veteran on camera while she was trying to save a Marine's life." Another board member cut in. "There is no spin that makes that acceptable." Holloway's lawyer cleared his throat. "My client acted in a moment of stress. He's willing to issue a public apology." "Your client," Sterling interrupted, "is done. The only question is whether he resigns or we terminate him for cause." "For cause?" Holloway's face flushed red. "That affects my severance package, Your severance package?" A female board member, herself a Navy veteran, leaned forward. "Mr. Holloway, you're lucky we're not bringing criminal charges ourselves. Actually, we don't need to. The San Diego District Attorney's Office called an hour ago. They're filing assault charges. Apparently, the video evidence is quite compelling." The color drained from Holloway's face. "Criminal charges. Did you think there wouldn't be consequences?" Sterling's voice was razor-sharp. "You didn't just hit an employee. You hit a woman who spent 20 years in combat zones saving American lives. You hit her while she was treating a homeless veteran, in front of witnesses, on camera. The DA says it's the easiest case they've had all year." Holloway's lawyer whispered urgently in his ear. After a moment, Holloway slumped in his chair. "What do you want?" "Your resignation, effective immediately. You'll release all claims to severance beyond what we're legally obligated to provide. You'll issue a public apology, which our PR team will draft, and you'll never work in healthcare administration again. We'll make sure of that." "And if I refuse?" Sterling smiled, but it held no warmth. "Then we terminate you for cause, which means 0 severance, and we cooperate fully with the criminal investigation and any civil suits Nurse Reid chooses to file. We have excellent lawyers. You'd be bankrupt within a year. The meeting lasted 17 minutes total. Marcus Holloway signed the resignation letter with a shaking hand. By 5 p.m., the hospital's new interim CEO, Dr. Jennifer Martinez, a respected administrator and Army veteran herself, held a press conference on the hospital steps. Effective immediately, Marcus Holloway is no longer associated with Veterans Memorial Hospital or Apex Healthcare Systems. His policies regarding insurance verification and veteran care programs are hereby rescinded. This hospital was founded to serve those who served our country, and we are recommitting to that mission fully. Reporters shouted questions. Dr. Martinez raised a hand. Furthermore, we are offering Sarah Reid the position of Director of Veterans Services, with full authority over care protocols and program development. We are establishing new policies to ensure no veteran is ever turned away from care, regardless of their ability to pay. More questions. What about criminal charges against Holloway? That's a matter for law enforcement. However, the hospital is cooperating fully with the district attorney's office. We have provided all relevant security footage and witness statements. Inside the hospital, Sarah sat in a small conference room with Dr. Martinez and the hospital's board of directors. The job offer lay on the table in front of her. Ms. Reid, Dr. Martinez said gently, I understand this is overwhelming. You don't need to decide today. Sarah looked at the contract. Director of Veterans Services, a position created specifically for her, full authority to design programs, a salary nearly double what she'd been making, the ability to help veterans on a systemic level, not just one patient at a time. I have one condition, Sarah said quietly. Name it. Miguel Torres, the veteran I was treating when, she touched her bruised cheek. I want him to receive full care, housing assistance, job training, whatever he needs, and I want him to be the first participant in a new program for homeless veterans with PTSD. Dr. Martinez smiled. Already approved. In fact, I spoke with Mr. Torres this morning. He wanted me to give you this. She handed Sarah a handwritten note. The writing was shaky but legible. Nurse Sarah, you saved my life twice. Once in the ER and once by showing the world that Marines matter. I'm getting help now. Real help, thank you, Semper Fi. Miguel Torres. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. Where is he? Checked into our psychiatric care unit 3 hours ago. Voluntarily. Full coverage, no cost. He said he wanted to get better because you believed he could. Sarah signed the contract. The story of Miguel Torres hit the news that evening. A local reporter had interviewed him with his permission, and his words carried weight. I was invisible, Miguel said, his face gaunt but his eyes clearer than they'd been in years. Just another homeless vet, another casualty nobody cared about, but Nurse Sarah, she saw me, she always saw me, and when that CEO tried to throw me out, she fought for me. She took a hit for me. What kind of person does that? The interview went viral. Within 24 hours, donations began flooding in, not to Apex Healthcare but to a newly established fund, the Reid Family Veterans Care Foundation. The foundation's mission was simple: provide free medical care, mental health services, and housing assistance to uninsured veterans. The initial donations totaled over $2 million. By the end of the week, it had grown to $5 million. Sarah's sons helped manage the flood of support. Michael coordinated with military organizations. David established partnerships with VA facilities. James worked with active duty units to identify veterans who'd fallen through the cracks. On Friday, exactly 1 week after the assault, the San Diego District Attorney announced formal charges against Marcus Holloway: assault and battery, creating a hostile work environment, and violation of medical care standards. The charges carried potential jail time. Holloway's lawyer tried to negotiate a plea deal. The DA's response was public and pointed. Mr. Holloway assaulted a military hero. There will be no special treatment. The preliminary hearing was set for 6 weeks out. Legal experts predicted a conviction was certain given the video evidence. Meanwhile, Sarah returned to work, not in the ER, but in a spacious new office labeled Director of Veterans Services. Her first official act was launching the Homeless Veterans Outreach Program, with Miguel Torres as its first success story and eventually its spokesperson. Her second act was establishing a hotline for veterans in crisis, staffed 24/7 by trained counselors, many of them veterans themselves. Her third act was creating partnerships with local organizations to provide job training, housing assistance, and mental health care. Within a month, over 300 veterans had been helped through her programs. Sarah worked 12-hour days, driven by the same dedication that had carried her through 20 years of military service. But now, instead of treating wounds one at a time, she was healing systemic problems. Her sons visited when they could, proud beyond words. Her colleagues treated her with reverence. Veterans stopped by her office daily, some to thank her, some to volunteer, some just to shake the hand of the woman who'd changed everything. And every evening before she left for home, Sarah would walk through the ER, now renamed the Lieutenant Commander Sarah Reid Emergency Care Center, and check on the night shift. The nurses there would smile and say, "We've got this, boss, go home." But Sarah always stayed a little longer, because some habits she'd learned were worth keeping. 6 months after the incident that changed everything, Sarah Reid stood before a crowd of over 1,000 people gathered for the dedication of the Reid Family Center for Veteran Care. The new facility, built with donations from across the country, rose 4 stories high on land adjacent to Veterans Memorial Hospital. The April sun warmed her face as she looked out at the sea of people, veterans in uniform, families with children, hospital staff, military officials, and community members who'd followed her story. Her 3 sons stood beside her in dress blues, Michael on her right, David on her left, James just behind, all impossibly proud. "Mom," Michael whispered, "you ready?" Sarah touched the medal around her neck, the civilian service medal the generals had given her 6 months ago. She wore it today for the first time since the ceremony. "As ready as I'll ever be," she said softly. Senator Martinez approached the podium first. 6 months ago, America witnessed an injustice. A decorated Navy veteran was assaulted for doing what she'd spent 20 years doing, helping those who served our country. But America also witnessed something else: the power of community, the strength of our military family, and the unstoppable force of people who refuse to accept wrong as inevitable. The crowd applauded. Sarah's cheek, fully healed now, though a faint scar remained, flushed with emotion. "Today," the senator continued, "we dedicate this center not just to Sarah Reid, but to every veteran who's fallen through the cracks, to every Marine, soldier, sailor, and airman who came home from war only to find themselves fighting a different kind of battle. This center represents a promise. You are not forgotten. You are not invisible. You matter." General Matheson spoke next, his voice strong despite his 72 years. "I've known Sarah Reid for nearly 20 years. In Ramadi, she pulled me from a burning vehicle while under enemy fire. She worked on me for 6 hours with minimal supplies, refusing to let me die. When I asked her later why she risked her life for me, you know what she said." He paused, looking directly at Sarah. She said, "General, you would have done the same for any of your Marines. We're family." That's who Sarah Reid is. That's what this center represents. The generals, all 3 who'd stood beside her that day, cut the ribbon together, their movements synchronized, military precision meeting profound respect. The tour that followed revealed the center's scope. The ground floor housed a 24-hour emergency clinic specifically for veterans. The second floor offered mental health services, private counseling rooms, group therapy spaces, a meditation garden. The third floor provided job training and placement services. The fourth floor contained temporary housing for homeless veterans transitioning back to stability. Miguel Torres led part of the tour, clean-shaven now, wearing khakis and a polo shirt with the center's logo. He'd been sober for 5 months, employed as a peer counselor for 3, and had just moved into his own apartment. 6 months ago, I was living under a bridge, trapped in memories of Iraq, he told the crowd, his voice steady. I came to the ER having a PTSD episode, and Nurse Sarah didn't see a problem. She saw a Marine who needed help. What happened next changed my life, and maybe changed a lot of lives. He gestured to the rooms around them. This center has already helped 400 veterans in its pilot phase. 400 people who might have been me, lost and forgotten. Every one of them got help because Sarah Reid refused to give up on me. His voice cracked. Ma'am, I'll never be able to repay you. Sarah stepped forward and hugged him. Miguel, you just did. Every veteran you help, every life you touch, that's the repayment. Pass it forward. The evening celebration moved to the hospital's courtyard, where the memorial wall had been expanded. New names had been added, including a special section, in honor of those who serve our service members. Sarah's name was there. So were the names of other nurses, doctors, and counselors who dedicated their lives to veteran care. Tom Reid's name remained where it had always been, among the fallen. Sarah stood before it as the sun set, her sons flanking her. Hey baby, she whispered, touching his engraved name. Wish you could see this. The boys are doing so good. Michael's up for full colonel. David's been recommended for battalion command. James is. Well, James is still giving me heart attacks with his missions, but he's thriving. She smiled through tears. And me, I'm helping more veterans than I ever could have in the ER. It's good work, Tom, the kind you would have been proud of. He is proud, Mom, Michael said quietly. We all are. A young Marine approached hesitantly, no more than 19, with fresh burns on his arms, recently treated from the looks of the bandages. Ma'am, Nurse Reid. Sarah turned, immediately shifting into assessment mode. Are you okay? Do those burns need? No, ma'am, I'm fine, He struggled with the words. I'm Private First Class Danny Rodriguez. My dad was Gunnery Sergeant Rodriguez. He served with you in Afghanistan. Sarah's eyes widened. Gunny Rodriguez, is he? He's here, ma'am. He wanted me to give you this. The young Marine handed her an envelope. Inside was a photo. Gunny Rodriguez, older now but smiling, surrounded by 5 children and a beautiful wife. On the back he'd written, Sarah, you saved my life in 2009. Because of you I got to meet my wife, raise my kids, and watch my oldest son join the Corps. He's at Pendleton now. Thank you for giving me this life. Semper Fi. Gunny R. He's watching from the back, Private Rodriguez said. Didn't want to intrude on your big day. Intrude? Sarah was already moving. She found Gunny Rodriguez standing near the memorial wall, older and grayer but still standing tall. When he saw her, tears filled his eyes. Ma'am. Gunny, she hugged him hard. Look at you, look at your family. All because of you. No, Sarah said firmly. Because you fought to live, I just gave you the chance. They talked for an hour, about his kids, his life, the Marines he still mentored. Similar conversations happened all around the courtyard. Veteran Sarah had treated family members of those she'd saved, Marines who'd heard the stories and wanted to meet the legend. As the evening wound down and the crowd thinned, Sarah found herself back in the hospital's ER, old habits. She watched the night shift work, efficient, compassionate, dedicated. A young nurse approached. Director Reid, can I ask you something? Of course, honey. How do you do it? Stay strong when everything's hard, when it feels like you're fighting a losing battle. Sarah thought about the question. 6 months ago, she'd been assaulted for trying to help a veteran. She could have quit, sued for damages, walked away. Instead, she'd fought back, not with anger but with service. and that choice had created ripples that became waves. "You do it one patient at a time," Sarah said finally. "One shift, one day. You do it because someone has to, and you're the one standing there. And you remember that even when you can't save everyone, the ones you do save matter. They have families, futures, lives worth fighting for." The young nurse nodded, absorbing the wisdom. An ambulance pulled up. The radio crackled. "Incoming, Marine from Pendleton, training injury, possible internal bleeding." Sarah's training kicked in automatically. "What do you need?" "Ma'am, you don't have to." "What do you need?" Sarah repeated, already moving toward the bay. The young nurse smiled. "Grab a gown, Director, let's save a Marine." 3 years later, Marcus Holloway completed his court-ordered community service at a VA medical center in Phoenix. He'd served 6 months in jail, paid substantial fines, and worked 1,000 hours helping veterans, the very population he'd tried to turn away. The work changed him. Slowly, painfully, he began to understand what he'd failed to see before, that numbers on a balance sheet represented real people with real sacrifices. He would never work in healthcare again. His reputation was permanently damaged. But in quiet moments, he thought about Sarah Reid and the grace she'd shown by not pursuing maximum penalties. She'd let the justice system do its work, then moved on to helping others. It was a lesson he'd spend the rest of his life learning. Present day. Sarah Reid, now 55, arrived at the Reid Family Center at 6 a.m. like always. The center had expanded twice, now serving over 3,000 veterans annually. Her programs had been replicated in 17 cities across the country. She walked through the quiet halls, checking on overnight patients, reviewing charts, ensuring her team had what they needed. In the mental health wing, she paused at Miguel Torres' door. He was leading a group session later, from homeless to hopeful, he called it. 23 veterans had graduated his program, 23 lives rebuilt. In the ER, a young Marine sat alone, eyes distant, hands shaking, fresh from deployment, struggling, scared. Sarah sat down beside him. "Hey there, warrior, I'm Sarah, let's talk." The Marine looked at her, at the kind eyes, the warm smile, the small anchor.
Levati. Dai. Curiosità. Ah, devi stare proprio in mezzo, ok. No, aiuto. Come ci arrivo lassù? Sicuramente con quel saltino lì, quindi deve essere in alto. Quindi abbiamo di nuovo questo. Questo. E dovrebbe essere così. Sì, sì, è come se ci arrivo. Ui! Voilà. E questo ce l'abbiamo. Sono senza giocarci da quando è uscito. Secondo te ricordo a memoria tutti i passaggi. Al massimo ti aiuto con la coppa e che la stai giocando. Beh, non mi sembra ti star andando male.